A day with no new migrants. It's been weeks since Denver hasn't seen newcomers from the southern border. Progressives at the Capitol will risk a veto from the governor and try to lift the ban on rent control.
What's really changed is that the voters elected us to do something about this affordable housing crisis.
Sure, our Xcel bills have doubled or tripled, but the good news is the company has increased its billion-dollar-plus profit. More people are calling in tips to human trafficking hotlines. It's not necessarily always a good thing. And no pressure for this school project. It's only NASA watching. That's tonight on Next. No migrants arrived in Denver overnight. Not one. At least not one the city knows about. And that is noteworthy because it's the first time that's happened since the city started tracking numbers late last year. At that point when people started coming up from the southern border by the thousands. At one point, it was 100 or 200 new folks a day. And you've heard their stories here. Many are from Venezuela. Some say they're seeking asylum from violence. Others told us they just want work and a better life. More than 4,000 migrants have come since early December, many staying in rec centers that were turned into emergency shelters. As the flow of people has slowed, the city is phasing out those shelters. The very last one is still open, in part because there's cold weather coming. Colorado cities can't try rent control, even if they wanted to experiment with it. And Democratic Governor Jared Polis is openly skeptical of the idea. Yet progressives at the state capitol are going to try again, try and lift the state ban on local rent control. They're convinced now the time is right. Javier Mabry is a renters' rights attorney who recently won a House seat representing Southwest Denver. He's one of the prime sponsors of a new House bill to let local governments set their own policies on rent control. He points to the fact that he has co-sponsors across the state, Western Slope to northern Colorado to the city. And the bill has backing within his caucus, from freshman Democrats to party leadership.
This is something that's being felt across the state, and we have co-sponsors who are in Weld County and El Paso County, all over the state. And I think that's a big difference in our approach this time versus 2019, is that the climate is different and we have an affordability crisis, and we need to make sure that local communities have the tools to address that.
A 2019 rent control bill never made it out of the state Senate. Last year, a much narrower bill that would have dealt with mobile home park rent, that faced a veto threat from Governor Polis, ended up getting scaled back pretty good. The governor's office told us today he's open to proposals, but he's skeptical that rent control will actually create more housing stock. With Coloradans hurting from Xcel bills that are double or triple this time last year, at least we know that Xcel shareholders are sharing in the pain. And actually, they're not. No, the company made $1.7 billion, more than last year. Our Marshall Zellinger's been on Xcel like white on rice lately, and he explains why Xcel's profits don't result in any break on increasing bills.
We had another very successful year at Xcel Energy.
That is Xcel CEO Bob Frenzel on an investor call this morning as the company revealed how well it did for the final 3 months of last year. By the way, I made a mistake yesterday when I said Xcel had earned almost $650 million through the first 3 quarters of 2022. That was just the third quarter. The number on this graphic should have been double. But now we know how much Xcel made all year. $1.7 billion, money that can be paid as dividends to investors or reinvested. We've received emails from viewers wanting to know about executive compensation. Well, it's a public document, so here you go. In 2021, the CEO made $8.5 million, though his quote-unquote salary was just $931,000. He became CEO in August of 2021. The previous CEO made $12.7 million total. His salary portion was $1.35 million. I point out the salary because that's where viewers can argue, hey, take less money and give us relief on our bills. I talked with DU finance professor Matt Klaus about that thinking.
It's the same argument you could make to people at Walmart. You could say, instead of passing on these higher costs that you're incurring because the goods that we're selling at Walmart are going up in cost, instead of increasing those prices to me, why don't you just keep the price to me the same and reduce the CEO's compensation or executive compensation?
I'm laughing because we know that would never happen. I do need to point out that Xcel is seeking to give us a break on gas costs because gas prices have gone down. They're asking the PUC, the commission that we told you about yesterday, for a reduction of our gas rates on our next 2 bills. It's not approved yet, but it should be next week. But Xcel is also seeking a rate increase for our electric bills starting in September. This was part of their investor call this morning, and it included something. I talked about how they ask for everything to be paid back plus. They're asking for 10% ROE, return on equity. Basically, the idea is like if I invest $100, I expect maybe $10 in return. That's built into the prices that are approved by the PUC.
Another thing that we heard about today was the idea that Xcel wants to convert the Comanche coal plant in Pueblo to be energy storage, which that's great for clean energy. And who's going to pay for that?
We're going to pay for it. There's two sides. We're going to pay for it. But it's also, hey, if they store more, maybe they don't have to buy expensive gas at a certain point.
We like that.
But we're going to have to pay for this storage facility.
Well, congratulations to Xcel on another very successful year. I know Coloradans are immensely happy for them. Marshall, thank you. Colorado's senators finally got a meeting with the Secretary of Defense over Space Command's proposed move down to Alabama. They got that meeting after they voted against a Pentagon nominee in protest this week. If that strategy sounds familiar, it's the strategy suggested by Democratic Senator Michael Bennet's Republican opponent, Joe O'Dea, the strategy that Bennett publicly condemned during the campaign.
All Michael Bennett had to do was say, you know what, I'm going to hold up this appointment. I'm going to hold up this bill. I'm going to hold up that bill. And I would use my seat to make sure that we keep Space Command here in Colorado. It's that important.
I think politicizing this decision in the wake of what Donald Trump did would be catastrophic for our national security and probably catastrophic for Space Command's chances of staying here in Colorado.
O'Dea tweeted a couple minutes ago, glad Senator Bennett is putting the catastrophic strategy to use. So we should be clear. O'Dea suggested that they hold out and obstruct in order to get more than just a meeting, but actually for a full reversal of the Trump-era decision to move Space Command out of Colorado. So we will be watching to see if Bennett and Senator John Hickenlooper are satisfied with just a meeting on this, or if they keep employing the O'Dea strategy to try and hold on to Space Command. Human trafficking experts are constantly battling both that exploitation and they're also fighting the sensationalized version of what people think human trafficking is today. These advocates are convinced that if more people learn the real story, then they'd be able to rescue more survivors. They told our Anusha Roy one way they measure how their efforts are working is how many hotline calls turn into criminal prosecutions.
A tip came in on September 27, 2020 from the Human Trafficking Hotline, a family member desperate to find her sister. Investigators started looking, carrying out surveillance, and eventually had a chance to talk to the survivor. She says the suspect was her drug dealer when they lived in another state. She told investigators she was tricked into coming to Denver and promised to be taken care of. But then after arriving in Colorado, he took her cell phone and ID. Court documents say he advertised her online, driving her hotel to hotel around the metro area. She told investigators she worked every single day but didn't get the money promised. Instead, the arrest warrant said some of that money was used to fuel her addiction while the suspect threatened her.
We filed 3 counts, third-degree felony human trafficking for sexual servitude, third-degree felony for pimping, and a Class 5 felony for pandering.
Denver's DA Beth McCann said those kinds of charges can carry as much as 40 years in prison. His trial is set for July.
I wouldn't have known about this woman and her situation or about this man and the kind of things that he was doing. So it is a very important hotline.
Since January of 2021, the Denver DA's office received 42 tips. 5 resulted in investigations. 1 resulted in criminal charges, the case we just discussed. Statewide, from 2019 to 2021, 338 cases were investigated. 71 filed for prosecution. 7 turned into convictions for human trafficking. 38 turned into convictions for another crime. 14 were dismissed, and 12 are still pending. At the same time, calls and tips jumped from 697 in 2020 to more than 1,000 in 2022.
It's discouraging that we weren't able to file more cases.
Sometimes a complaint isn't really human trafficking. There also has to be enough evidence. And then there's the delicate matter of witness and survivor testimony. But even if a case isn't filed,
we're able to work with the victim, help them get services.
Even if it's a gut feeling, call the information into the hotline, let the experts figure out if it's human trafficking or not.
Experts like Caitlin Prishlak, a manager at the hotline.
Something concerning at a grocery store.
And knows the hotline campaign is making some kind of impact because more survivors have been reaching out.
People have called us from their home. People have called us from somewhere on the street. They've called us from their doctor's office.
And sometimes they only have 10 minutes to connect with the survivor and get them the help that they need. So to be very clear here, the tips, all of them are looked at that you call or you text, and they're passed along to investigators to figure out if this case can move forward. But the experts we talked to said that quality of information they've been getting is actually improving. They ask for things like specifics of cars, information about what made them think that something wrong was happening or suspicious. Kyle, I do want to mention that the survivor in that case we talked to is still receiving resources after connecting with investigators in the DA's office, and we're told that she's doing well.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, awareness is a nebulous concept. Everybody talks about awareness, but I feel like we're talking about this issue and in detail in a way that we were not always.
Yeah, I mean, there's billboards everywhere. You're seeing signs about the hotline in stores and, all over the city and across the state. And some of this is individual people who are involved in this sphere really trying to get people to be more aware. But then Colorado has also over the years changed their laws. So before it was very vague, so it was hard to prosecute. And then in 2014, they actually changed the wording to better define what human trafficking is. But then you started seeing the education component of it, right? Telling people what it is, not only for community members to call in, but also survivors sometimes are seeing this information and going, oh my gosh, that happened to me in the past. Let me call in, try to get help, let people know what happened.
There's one thing that I know about folks who watch this program is that they want to be better informed about complex issues. So thank you for all your work on this. The visiting scholar at CU who tried to overturn American democracy might lose his license to do, more of that. Another loss in court for a baker who spent years trying to refuse certain customers' requests based on his religion. And an unusual high school project.
It's just really fun. I like building stuff.
Some of us built birdhouses in high school. They're working with NASA. Next. Former CU visiting scholar John Eastman still has his law license even after he crafted the legal case to overthrow American democracy. But perhaps not for long. The California State Bar is bringing 11 disciplinary charges against Eastman for his role in helping devise former President Trump's strategy to overturn the 2020 election and stop the electoral vote count in multiple states. Eastman's also facing charges related to a speech that he gave at Trump's pre-insurrection rally on January 6th. The State Bar says those comments riled up the people who later stormed the Capitol. The charges against Eastman will be heard in disciplinary hearings, and then a judge will decide whether he can keep his license to practice law. Colorado's Court of Appeals has agreed with a lower court decision that a cake shop owner violated the state's anti-discrimination laws when he refused to bake a specific cake for a customer who's transgender. Jack Phillips and Masterpiece Cake Shop refused to sell a blue and pink cake to Autumn Scardina, an attorney who wanted to celebrate her gender transition. Phillips was at the center of a similar case in 2012 when he refused to bake a cake for a gay couple's wedding. That case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and Phillips won a partial victory there. He said that both cases were brought to target him for his outspoken religious beliefs. His attorneys say they plan to appeal again. They were hoping that Colorado's Court of Appeals would wait on its ruling until after the U.S. Supreme Court decides a similar case that features a website designer from Colorado who refused to make a wedding website for a same-sex couple. That case is also challenging Colorado's anti-discrimination law, so a ruling in the website case could impact this new cake case. Denver's public health leaders say that they are finalizing new cleaning policies to deal with meth contamination in public places. That's become quite the focus after contamination shut down a couple of public libraries. Spokesperson with the city's Department of Public Health says the new protocol will deal with health concerns like meth or other substance contamination, as well as the potential for viruses like COVID-19. City will also dictate when public spaces should be alerting Denver police or public health to a possible contamination. Public health leaders and harm reduction advocates have stressed the same thing on this, that the risk of exposure from low levels of drug residue is pretty minimal. It's more elevated with long-term exposure to the chemicals that are released during drug production. STEM students are working on a project that could change how we ship things through space.
It looks really hard and complicated, but with a little bit of research, it's really easy to understand.
Don't worry. We will ask the children to explain it to us like we're children. Next. What was your coolest project you remember from high school? We made these little wood cars that were powered by a CO2 capsule. It was okay, I guess. There are 2 schools in Colorado working with NASA on experiments that'll go on a high-altitude balloon flight. Kind of beats the little race car thing. We caught up with some kids at the STEM lab in North Glen who won that contest to work with NASA for a 2nd year in a row.
All right, are you guys ready to open the box from NASA? Engineering has a pipeline problem. Programs like the NASA Tech Rise Challenge let students know that they can be engineers.
It was kind of just a school project, class project that we were doing, and we ended up winning.
The day that they found out they won, we had 85 kids in a library, and when STEM Lab scrolled up on the screen, and you heard them jump up and down and start dancing and tackle each other with joy. And so this year, the challenge focused on weather balloons and how students could design an experiment to fit in this flight box. Students got to pick what variable they wanted to test it and how they would build it and control it to collect data.
We're going to build a balloon. Yeah, mostly with this stuff.
Okay, what's this? What does it look like?
A lot of lots of sensors, cameras. It's testing the radiation levels from different packaging materials for when we inevitably need to ship stuff from planet to planet.
Foam, bubble wrap, packing peanuts, cardboard. Delivery items.
It looks really hard and complicated, but with a little bit of research, it's really easy to understand.
And sometimes it's almost better when we let kids create solutions to things because they don't have that list of things we can't do. As adults, when you say we need to do this, it's all the reasons we can't. Kids, it's, well, what if we could? What do you think?
Summit Ridge Middle School in Littleton's also working on that project. The classes build the experiments. NASA takes them to the stratosphere. The most Colorado thing we saw today is at a brewery, naturally. And could it be positive feedback on the show? That's next. A man and a dog walk into a brewery, and it's the most Colorado thing we saw today. Viewer named Frank Hartley snapped this photo of one very large animal sidled up to the bar. It's Zwei Brewery in Fort Collins. He's got his own bar stool and everything, enjoying one of those delicious lagers they make up there. I got a beer writer friend from out of state who swears that Zwei could be the sneaky best brewery in Colorado. And I don't disagree. The last time that we were up there, spent all night talking to a bunch of really nice Next viewers from across northern Colorado. In your feedback tonight, Jason says, thank you for continuing to get answers from Xcel Energy on our bills. Absolutely. Please keep your questions and perspectives on this coming, because we're thinking a lot about this, but we're not going to think of everything. It's your questions that really drive a lot of our coverage. A text in that says, has the PUC ever declined an Xcel rate increase? I believe that Marshall said earlier this week that there was one recent example. Randy asks, can Marshall Zellinger serve on the PUC? He could if he was appointed by the governor. So no, he won't be on the PUC. And then Shirley writes in to say, I'm an educator who loves to be educated. Watching Next scratches that itch. I love that. That is my favorite viewer comment we've gotten in a long time. That's me too. Any night we can learn something, good night on Next. See you next time.